day, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. First of all, let me thank you for giving us an opportunity to chat about an issue or the current events here in our country that spans in three periods in the Philippine history. I am Orion Kyle Ailina, and I'm looking forward to talking with you all today. On behalf of the group, I was assigned to introduce the topic we will about to tackle. As you can see on the screen, the topic we chose is about racism. In this presentation, we will be focusing about the roots, which Miss Merlin Quantiosa will be the one to share it with you, and to be followed by Miss Rosemary Lavilla about the problems, and to propose solutions will be Miss Claire Hibaya, and lastly, the recommendations will be Miss Hanny Grace Garcinelia. My talk is particularly relevant to those of you who needs to gain knowledge and learn deeply about racism. And of course, to avoid prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism that is directed against other people because they are of a different race or ethnicity. This talk is designed to act as a springboard for this discussion. So what exactly is racism? Do you have any idea? Okay. We all know that racism is a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on physical properties such as skin color and hair texture. This system unfairly disadvantages some individuals and groups and damages their health and mental health. Racism is structural, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Racism takes many forms and can happen in many places. Racism is more than just words, beliefs, and actions. It includes all the barriers that prevent people from enjoying dignity and equality because of their race. Okay, before we'll proceed to the next topic, which Miss Merlin Quantiosa will be the one to share it with you, let's first differentiate race, racism, and racialization in order for you to understand what really is racism. Okay, so let's start with race. Okay, race is a social construct, but the experience of racism is real. Okay, race is a socially constructed phenomenon based on the erroneous assumption that physical differences such as skin color, hair color, and texture, and facial or other physical features are related to intellectual, moral, or cultural superiority. The concept of race has no basis in biological reality and, as such, has no meaning independent of its social definition. Modern science has shown that there is no biological foundation to race. Physical differences between individuals and groups of individuals are genetically so minute that they are meaningless. What is real about race is the social meaning that we attribute to particular perceived differences and the political and economic forces that support these perceptions. In other words, what happens here is that we take these markers of difference, often unconsciously, and use them to form assumptions about an individual's or group's identity. These assumptions then feed into the way that we view, treat, or behave around certain individuals. This occurs not only at the level of the individual, but on a macro level as well. While race may be a social construct, these experiences are real to racialized individuals, that is, for individuals who are raised or seen as a race. Okay, what is racism? Racism is different from racial prejudice, hatred, or discrimination. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systematic discrimination through the institutional policies and practices of the society and by shaping the cultural beliefs and values that support those racist policies and practices. Things like racism are institutional acts. It's systematic. You might not know any by guts. You feel like, well, I don't hate black people, so I'm not a racist. But you benefit from racism just by the merit of the color of your skin. There are opportunities that you have, you're privileged in ways that you may not even realize because you haven't been deprived in certain ways. We need to talk about these things in order for them to change. Okay, what is racialization? It is the act of being raised or seen as someone belonging to a particular race. Racialization is the very complex and contradictory process through which groups come to be designated as being part of a particular race, and on that basis, subjected to differential and or unequal treatment.
Racism in the Philippines is multifarious and emerged in various portions of history of people, institutions, and territories coinciding to that of the present day of Philippines. Number one root cause of racism in Philippines is against Bangsamoro. Polls have shown that some Filipinos hold negative views directed against the Moro people due to alleged Islamic terrorism. Number 2. Against ethnic Chinese. Contact between the indigenous peoples of the islands and the Han began hundreds of years ago, predating the arrival of Westerners. Strong ties through trade and commerce sustained ancient states such as the Kingdom of Tondo. The Sultanate of Sulu also has a significant relationship with the Ming dynasty, whereas its leader Paduka Batara, granted the only foreign monument in China, was sent his son to pay tribute to Emperor Yongle. Despite years of contact, the rift between the two groups emerged at the height of the Spanish colonization. After the destructive raids of various ports and towns, including the newly Spanish established Manila by Chinese pirate Limahong, the colonial government saw the Chinese as a threat and decided to curb the Sangley in the colony by ethnic segregation and immigration control. Assimilation by conversion to Catholicism was also enforced by the Governor General Gomez Perez das Marinas in the late 16th century. Only Catholic Sanglays, Indio wives, and their mestizo de Sanglay children were granted land such as in Parian and nearby Binondo. However, these measures to attain racial control were seen to be difficult to achieve. As a result, four massacres, the first happening in 1603, and expulsions ensued against unconverted Sanglays. Other ethnic motivated incidents were during the massacre of Sanglays as a retaliation to Coxingas raids of several towns in Luzon during 1662. The Spanish colonial government imposed legislation on the ethnic Chinese, which were viewed unfavorably. Such laws were meant to Christianize the ethnic Chinese and them assimilate into mainstream Philippine society and to encourage them to take up farming. The Chinese were viewed as an economic, political, and socio-religious threat to the small Spaniard colonial population in Spanish Philippines. As part of the phenomenon of transculturation and acculturation in the modern Chinese Filipino community as an integrated minority group in Philippine society, some level of endogamy and self-segregation is also present, stemming from concerns of protecting and preserving the cultural identity and cultural heritage of the group as part of cultural rights on the basis of cultural conservatism. to prevent and resist complete cultural assimilation and ethnocide, wherein some would refuse to many Filipinos without Chinese descent. For younger generations in the Philippines, this phenomenon is called the Great Wall, in reference to the Great Wall of China, as a euphemism to describe the social barriers used to prevent outside forces from entering and supplanting the culture. In this case, it is used to prevent Filipinos without Chinese descent from entering the Chinese Filipino family through an interethnic marriage due to fears of complete assimilation of the family's cultural identity to the society's dominant cultures. Due to the fears and concerns, some Filipinos without Chinese descent who wish to enter into the Chinese Filipino community is said to have to climb the Great Wall in order to cross the social barrier and so feel diminished and excluded from these barriers that prevent the dominant culture from completely subsuming in Chinese Filipino community. And the third cause is on highland ethnic groups. Ethnic divided among highland tribes began from the conception of the Philippine state, notably during the Commonwealth of the Philippines. The said Commonwealth government established the Institute of National Language Filipino o Surian ng Wikang Pambansa, which adopted Tagalog as the baseline for the national language. The rights of the Filipinos highland groups are legally protected under Indigenous Peoples Rights Act or PRA, which is cited as the first of its kind in Southeast Asia. The law enabled them to acquire titles to their ancestral domains. However, the Highlanders continue to experience some degree of discrimination and are described by cultural anthropologist Nestor Castro that they still cannot identify with the so-called mainstream society or culture. Highlanders particularly experience marginalization in urban areas such as in Manila.
So these are the 8 problems of racism. First is social bias against natives. Sadly, this is a grim reality that we find difficult to accept, especially because we like to claim that we are a modern people. To this day, people view Negritos and other tribes like the Bajau and Igorots as inferior and backward, despite the fact that common Pinoys also hold a lot of outdated beliefs like superiority of race. Second is standards of beauty. One of the mildest way we show our racism is in our standards of beauty. Of course, this is changing with some people as they come to recognize the Brazilian skin of an ebony complexion is attractive in its own right. However, no one can deny that majority of people still consider light skin in the go-to-the-fore idea of beauty. Many of our celebrities like Martin Rivera, Heart Evangelista, and Ann Cortez are widely lauded for being white and looking nothing like your average Filipina. Third is racialization. It is the process through which groups come to be designated as different and, on that basis, subjected to an equal treatment. Racialized groups include people who might experience differential treatment of that basis of race, ethnicity, language, religion, or culture. Racialized groups are treated outside the norm and receive an equal treatment based on their race. Racialization can extend to specific traits and attributes, which are connected to the racialized people and deemed to be abnormal and less worth. Fourth is historical disadvantage. It is the continued effect of historical action based on the racist ideologies and supported through world power structures. The combined impact of current and historical disadvantage is inflected in societal trends of low education, poverty, and income disparity. It is a factor that can give rise to or contribute to systemic discrimination. It is therefore necessary to consider an individual or groups already disadvantaged position in Filipino society when systemic discrimination is taking place. Fifth is stereotyping. It is the use of categories such as race, ethnicity, or religion to gain, process, and remember information about others. For example, an educator encourages South Asian Canadian students of law towards math and engineering while discouraging sports. Sixth is subtle racial discrimination, means act or conduct will have discriminatory effect. There does not need to be any intention to discriminate. Example, a manager frequently rolls his eyes or interrupts when a racialized employee speaks during staff meetings. Even though nothing wrong or inappropriate is being said, the manager is not observed to do with other employees. Seventh is racial profiling, refers to any action undertaken for reason for safety, security, or public protection that relies on stereotypes about race, color, ethnicity, ancestry, religion, or place of origin to subject an individual to scrutiny or treat them differently. Racial profiling is not based on a reasonable suspicion of person. For example, two African Canadian men are pulled over drive. Other characteristics that are commonly racialized are accent or accent, speech, name, clothing, diet, intelligence, beliefs, practices, and habits. Eighth is racial harassment. Refers to the patterns of behavior or comments which serve to isolate, humiliate, intimidate, or exclude racialized individuals. People experiencing racial harassment may not object to the comments or conduct because they are afraid of consequence of speaking out. Examples of racial harassment: racial epithets, slurs, jokes, name-calling, or nicknames. Racial cartoons or graffiti, derogatory comments that ridicule individuals because of race-related characteristics, religious, or dress, and etc.
Being a youth engaging in some societal issue like racism is a great contribution in nation building. One way to listen and stop racism is accepting everyone's flaws, embracing everyone's culture and respect each other. Immerse yourself to their beliefs and try to analyze their opinions and conception. We shall always look to the brighter side of life. Involving to the people around you, equality is very important. I speak to diminish racism, we all born unique and beautiful, exist with the people who appreciate it. Increase your awareness. Learn about and be sensitive to racial, ethnic, and cultural groups other than your own. Increase your understanding of other person's experience and point of view. Learn about the impact of racism on racialized people and groups both historically and today. Be conscious of racist attitude, language, and historicide. Challenge your assumption about people. Recognize the need to take responsibility for eliminating racism. Be aware that silence condones racist behavior. Take an action. Promote mutual respect between individuals. Offer support to people being harassed. Speak up against racist comments and jokes. Challenge others' negative assumption about people. Model racially inclusive and respectful language and behavior. Create learning environment that include the perspective and experience of diverse cultural groups. Promote a respectful and inclusive environment. My solution will be to spread more awareness on this topic by telling others that everyone is perfect just the way they are, no matter what color, gender, or race. Help spread the word about human rights by sharing article or news that show respect in human rights and short videos of anti-racism. It's simple. If you can love everyone, just respect them. Being respectful to one another can solve many problems including racism.
Recommendations become an end. There are 6 recommendations I can recommend to you. First, recognize institutional barriers that prevent members of target groups from having equal access to power and authority. Second, recognize ways that institutional barriers maintain power structure. Third, support engage in research or initiatives that empower racialized groups. Set up mentoring programs for racialized groups, students, and employees to encourage them to succeed. Set up discussion groups to explore ways that racism and racialization can be addressed. Use both personal and organizational power to challenge racism